And the reason for this is there were some changes made in the weight and in the value of coins, and they wanted to inflate the value of the Yerushalmiyos, so all they did was they added 20% to it. Shtei ephos. It also worked out that it was two ephos. The toida was made out of two ephos of flour. Ha'epha is shalosh sayin. It happens to be that an epha is 3 sayin, so two ephos are 6 sayin, which also work out to esrim isarin. So two ephos are also 2 Yisronis. So one epha is 10 Yisronis, 2 ephos are 20 Yisronis. Asar lechametz v'asar lematzah. In the korban toida, the way it was split up was there were 40 breads. Out of the 40 breads, 10 of them were chametz and 30 were matzah. The 2 Yisronis, as we'll learn from limudim, half of the flour, one full 10 Yisronos, were dedicated just for the 10 chalos of chametz, and the other 10 Yisronim had to be shared by 30 chalos of matzah, meaning the chalos of matzah were naturally much, much smaller. And that's all derived from psukim that we're going to learn today. Thank you very much. So these are all gzeres of kosmos. Asara lechametz, which is isar in lechala, the asara lematzah, and uvamatzah shalosh minim chalash rekik and revucha kum techois. Each min only has 3 1/3 esronim. Nimshul shloisha esronim shlish lechol minumin, and 3 1/3 divided by 10, because there's 10 chalas made out of each set of 3 1/3 esronos. Ushloish v'shalosh chalash lisarin. So it would work out to a challah being only 1/3 of a nisar. Now, uvamidi Yerushalmi, if you wanted to use measurements that were commonly used in Yerushalayim, it would be shloishim kav. It would be a total of 30 kav for the flour of a korban toida, and it would be split into two. Chamisha aser lachametz v'chamisha aser lamatzah. Chamisha aser lachametz is kav umerza lachala. 15 divided by 10 is 1.5. So Avi Chala was 1.5 kav. Chamisha aser lamatzah, this is much more easily divided by 3. Every 10 breads were made out of 5 kabin, which means 5 divided by 10 is 0.5, which means each challah was a half a kaf. The first line in our Mishnah is that the Torah comes out of 5 soin Yerushalmiyos. Mina hanamili. How do we know? And what we're looking for specifically is how do we know the Ephah Shalosh Soin? How do we know that an Ephah is actually Shalosh Soin? Because our Mishnah told us that the Ephah is Shalosh Soin. Zog to Gemara, Amar Abchista, the Amar Kra, Ha'Ephah, and these are psukim in Yecheskel. Ha'efa, let's read it inside so that I don't butcher it up. Ha'efa v'habas, so an efa and a bas are toichen echad. Yeah, they're the same shear. A bas is the same shear as an efa. Loseis masar hachomer, and one efa or one bas would be good for meiser of a chomer, meaning a chomer is 10 times a bas or 10 efa. Habas v'asiris hachomer ha'efa, and the 10th of the chomer is an efa, and the chomer yia maskundai. So you see here very clearly that an isarin is that an efa is 1/10 of a chomer. Now, what does that tell us? We're looking for how we know that an efa is 3 sign. So Amar B'chista, the Amar Kra, ha'efa v'bas. Toichen echad yilachem, toichen echad yeh, ma bas shalosh soin, just like the bas is 3 soin, af efa shalosh soin, because a chomer is 30 soin. As the Rashi says over here, V'abasu netilas ma'is al chomer, the chomer who lamid tzoyin. The chomer is lamid tzoyin, and the pasuk said that an ephah and a bas are 1/10 of that, which is 3 tzoyin. Freit Gemara ubas gufa minolum. How do you know that the bas is also? How do you know that the bas is also the 3 sign? Zok Gemara ilam midichsiv loseis masar hachomer habas, which we just quoted in the pasuk a second ago. Efa nami haksiv vasiris hachomer haefa. So Zok Gemara Ella. So you have the same pasuk that you have by bas, you have by efa. So why are we bringing a raya from bas? We're looking for the size of an ephah. So why quote from bas? The same pasuk that you quoted that talks about bas talks about ephah as well. The teretz is because we have another problem. We said Rashi told us that a chaymer is 30 ephah or 30 bas, but how do you know that? Right? We're reverse engineering. We're saying since we know that the chaymer is 30. Since we know that the chaymer, I'm sorry, is 10 ephah, and therefore ephah could be meiser on the chaymer. That's how we know it's 3 sign, because a chaymer is 30 sign. But the question is, how do you know the chaymer is 30 sign? You need a base number to base it off. All we know is that an ephah and a bas is 1/10 of a chaymer. But you have to know first that a chaymer is 30 saw in order to know that an ephah or a bas is 3 saw. So the reason why we need the bas is because only through bas do we know that the chaymer is 30. But you don't see in this pasuk by bas either how much a chaymer is. You need another pasuk that is referring to bas and also opens your eyes to what a chaymer is. Let me look at the pasuk inside. It says v'choik hashemen, which is touched as. Let me look at the v'choik hashemen Rashi shal meiser. So the amount of shemen that you have to give, habas min hakor, habas from akor, asaras habatim chomer. Oh, so now we have it. So Dr. Rashi, habas hashemen, midas hashemen, zuhi meiser. Habas. The amount of shemen that you're giving for meiser is habas. Haya min hakur iser. It was a good meiser from a kur. Ketzat aseres habatim yil hamachimer. 10 batim are a chaymer. So now in this pasuk, it's relating a chaymer to a kur, and it's saying that a chaymer is like a kur, and therefore 1/10 of a chaymer and 1/10 of a kur would be a bas. So we still don't have the amount. What is this chaymer? What is this kur? And here's the punchline. Levisha chaymer hu asar batim ubicheskel ksivi hanikroi ubiktas svarim kosov kain v'chak hashem shal karbon abas. Ma'isa abas v'nabar. The kur hava asaris batim. The kur pshita lahu l'bnei bavel davar shloishim sayin. So for the fact that in the pasuk that says that bas is meiser for a chaymer as well as for a kur, and we know independently what is the volume of a kur, that it's 30 sayin, shall you moed in dvua b'sav a kur, because it was a very commonly used shear. That's how we know, because of the pasuk that describes that bas is good meiser for a chaymer and or for a kur, and we know that a kur is 30 sayin. That's where we know that the bas is 3 sayin, and from bas we learn to ephah. So that's why we got bas involved, because it's the pasuk about bas that clinched it for us, because that's how we knew what a chaymer is, the size of a chaymer. Okay, so zokt the pasuk elamehacha v'chak Hashem and abas Hashem and umayis abas min hakar aseres abatim chaymer. Aseres abatim chaymer. The way the Navi speaks in the Cheskel, it's like Navi language, so it's not crisp language from our. It's more poetic, so that's what the pasuk seems to read a little bit funny. Amar Shmuel, Zok Shmuel, Ein Moisifein Al Hamidos Yosy Mishtos. If the Chachamim ever want to change the value of currency and say that today's dollar is now $1.20. I'm sorry, that's midos. Midos is if they want to say a pound, the word pound refers to more weight than it currently refers to, or veloya matbeya, or the current coin is worth more than we have it valued at. Yosy mishtos. They're not allowed to increase its value more than 1/6. V'hamistaker. We also know there's a rule that when you're selling product, you're allowed a profit margin. Lo yistaker yosy mishtos. Your margin should be 1/6, which is about it's about 8.5%, right?
Are you talking about an outside shtus? Like, is that a 20% increase?
I'm happy you asked that. The Gemara is going to discuss if it's milabar or milagav, because it's a 20% increase if it's milabar. If it's milagav, then it's even less than that. That's right. My timer, Elam Mishamav Kurei Tara. So at first the Gemara thinks that Shmuel's halacha is based on Savara, not on the Gzeres HaKosov. So what could be possible reason? If it's of Kurei Tara, Kurei Tara is very simple. Let's say they increase the size of a bushel. They increase the size of a bushel. They start making bigger bushels, right? They increase the, it's called shrinkflation. I think Biden was using that word because things were going up. Manufacturers were making things in smaller packages.
It's opposite.
Right. I'm talking about the opposite of that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about increasing. So the problem with that is because if they make the bushel bigger, it's inevitable that the price of a bushel is going to go up. So big deal, you're getting more. Zokt Rashi, once people hear the price of a bushel went up, they're going to panic, and they're not going to chap. Some people might not chap that they changed the size of the bushel and they made the bushel bigger, but they'll think that there's a lack of apples this year, and for some reason they went up. So they're going to panic and try to hoard the market, and it's going to lead to real inflation, and that's why you shouldn't do it.
You have with tissues.
I'm sorry.
Tissue box. They keep on making them smaller.
That's right. Shrinkflation. Correct Gemara. So then why is the cutoff 1/6? If it goes up even less than the 6th, if it goes up 1/10, people are also going to see the prices rising, and they're going to make a rush on that product. Maybe it's because of Ainah. Meaning, if a merchant marks up the bushel, a merchant comes to the city. He didn't know he already has 2 or whatever it is that he bought on regular size bushels. Now he comes out to a new city and he doesn't chop that when he sells a bushel, he's going to have to give them more because he's going to measure out into the local kalim and he's going to be giving more. If he's giving more and he's charging the same price, he's being ripped off, right? Now, if he's ripped off more than a 1/6, it's called bittul mekach. The whole sale is null and void. It's going to cause problem with commerce. Up to 1/6, the sale is valid, but the customer will have to pay the extra amount to be mashlim his loss. So maybe they were trying to avoid bittul mekach. Zok Gemara, that wouldn't help because the Amarava called Dover Sheba Midah Sheba Mishkal Sheba Minyan. Afilu Pachas and Mikdei Noach Chayzer. If I tell you I'm selling you a pound of whatever I'm selling, a pound of meat, and there's even a tiny drop less than a pound, that's bottle. That's mega bottle. Because in normal values, people are not mocked up to a 1/6. But if I specifically say I want a pound and you don't give me a pound, that's not even on a mashu. So here we're talking about giving more than he was supposed to give. They're mocked over here. Whenever something is sold by the pound or by the volume, that means there's a hakpada. Ella mishum tager, or maybe it's just so that he should not have a loss. Now there's a girsa here that has to be changed, so let's learn it like the Bach. Now, what we're trying to do is, normally the merchant marks it up by 1/6. If we create this larger size of a 1/6, if worse comes to worse, he won't make any profit because he has to give now 1/6 extra because they increased the size of the bushel. But at least he won't lose his. So we're not worried that he doesn't make so much profit, but at least it won't cut into his principal. So maybe that's why they limited it to a 6. So ke'eched lo lematya pseudo. Frank Gemara, pseudo lematya rafcha loy boy. I don't understand. You're only worried that he shouldn't have a net loss. Aren't you concerned that he should make profit too? He's a merchant. Someone who buys and sells for the same price. That's called a soicher. You can't make it up on the volume because you have to be making a little bit of profit. It's funny because the Gemara often uses the word diena as it uses over here. If a merchant who's selling and turning over goods and not making any money, the Gemara says, Tagri Mikri dienu. I'm just saying. Huh? By me, it says, my Gemara says, Diena, Dalad Yud Aleph Nei. Doesn't it say Diena? Oh. Yeah, but what that was Diena doesn't mean anything to us. Zog to Gemara, Elo Amr Rab Chisda, Shmuel Krashkach B'darach. Shmuel learned it all out of a pasuk. It says in the pasuk, again in Yecheskel, Hashakel Esrim Geira, and it's very interesting how the Navi tells us the value. So shekel is Esrim Geira, Esrim Shkolim, Chamisha ve'Esrim Shkolim, Asar ve'Chamisha shekel. So let's add it up. 20 Shkolim plus 5 is 25, plus Esrim is 20, we're at 45, right? Asar ve'Chamisha plus 15 is 60. Shekel Amona. Amona is 60 Shkolim. Why couldn't the pasuk just say Amona is 60 Shkolim? Why did it break it up? So Rashi tells us that these were measurements that were used in the Beis HaMikdash, so it's broken up that way. But the main thing is that there's 60 shkolim in Amon. We always knew that there's 25. The understood valuation is 25 shekel in Amona, and each shekel is 4 dinarim. So there's 100 dinarim in Amona, which is 25 shekel. Here the pasuk is telling us that there's 60 shekel, meaning instead of 25, there's 50 plus another 10, right? So there's a huge inflation over here. So what does that mean? Zog to Gemara, mana is mason varbanavi. Come to hoist the mana is going to be 240 dinarim, which is way more than 100 dinarim. You see from the fact that they increased the mana to this amount, that we come to 3 conclusions. Shemamina mana shal kodesh kaval haya. We see that a mana of kodesh is double, so therefore instead of a mana being only 100 dinarim, it's 200 dinarim. Ushemamina ma'isivin al amidos ve'ma'isivin mishtus. That extra 40 out of the 200 is actually 1/6, which is 1/6 milabar on top, which answers Reb Shimon's question. And that's the conclusion from the fact that they made something 200 into 240, means that the 1/6 that they're adding, it's milavar, meaning you divide the keren by 5 and you add one section, and now what you added is 1/6 of the total amount. So first it went from 100 to 200 because kodesh, the mana of kodesh, they doubled its value, and then they increased the size by up to 1/6, which makes it a total of 240. You could see there's a long Tosfos on there, and there's a lot of discussion here because there's a couple of things you have to look at. There's a couple of moving parts. The first thing is this 20 gera causes a lot of problems because Tosfos says we know it's 24 gera. So Tosfos says that there were stages. There were different economies made at different times that changed things. But Tosfos has a pshat, which Rashi alludes to, that all they really did was they increased the size of the dinner from 20 gera to 24 gera. And that had the effect of downstream making the mana bigger and making the cell bigger. That made everything bigger. The reason why this is relevant is because we have 2 things that Shmuel said. You can inflate the size of measurements and you can inflate the value of a coin. So there's 2 things over here involved. By making the gera bigger, by making the dinar bigger, they also inflated the value of the money. but there was also an inflation of measurements involved in this takana that they made. I still don't understand why they did it. It just makes it so confusing. Ravina, Mas Nisan Nami Deka. The Mishnah is muduyak that way. The Katani Taida Haisabah Chame Shain Yerushalmiyos Shein Sheish Midbariyos. So clearly they added 20%, but it's 20% of internal. So I mean they took 5 and they added 20% to that to the top, and now that 20% is really less than 20%, it's only 1/6 now. So 1/6 is about 17, 18%, right? 70%. Sheish Midwari Shmamina. Okay, simple enough. Now it's going to be a bunch of Lamudim. It could be intimidating, but it's pretty easy more. Mikula Mayonoitel Echad Measara Truma. There's 40 breads, and from each one of the 40 breads, for each set of 10, they took one. Shenemar Vehikriv Mimenu Echad Mikol Carbon Truma Lashem. That's the pasuk by the carbon taida. Echad, it says Echad Mikol Carbon Shaloyitel Paris. We had this limud yesterday that you have to be mafresh a complete bread. It cannot be a slice off the loaf of bread, right? After the Gemara said that if you can make one from each min, you'd have to be isason, you'd have to separate it already. Mikol carbon shiyu kol carbon neshavos, meaning shloitel mekarbon al chaver. You can't say, okay, I'll give you 2 from this type and 0 from that type. It has to be 1 from each type. Lakoina zorik estam hashlamim lo yiyah. He gets it. That 1 out of 10. V'ashar nechal bailim, and the rest of the breads are eaten by the bailim. I want you to over that there's a lot of food involved in the carbon taida. There's 40 breads and there's the meat. A shlomim you get 2 days to eat, but a taida you only get 1 day. There's so much more food involved. So I wondered. I think b'shem the Meshech Chachma, the whole purpose of the taida is to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for a chesed that He did. Hashem wants you to do that with a big party to publicize it. So Hashem makes you have a lot of food and not enough time to eat it, so you need a lot of people at the party. Zokt Gemara, Tanur Rabbanan. V'ikriv mimenu min ha-mechuber. What does mechuber mean? Zokt Rashi, mechuber means you have to have all the breads together in a container. You can't just have bread scattered and take one of them. Echad shelo yitel paris mikol carbon shiyu kol carbon neshavos, meaning shelo yitel min carbon al chaverei. Truma Hashem. Ein yedea mikamahi. I don't know what is the total. I don't know how much I have to give. What percentage of the bunch do we have to give? We're saying 1 out of 10. Where did that number come from? So Gemara already done. Nemer kan truma. It says truma in reference to the breads of the taida. V'nemer betrumas meiser a loshon of truma. Ma la'alon echad me'asara. Afkan echad me'asara. Just like trumas meiser is 1/10, so too the truma of the lachmei taida is 1/10. Or maybe compare it to bikurim. Nemer kan truma, but nemer bikurim truma. Malalon ein lo shir. Just like by bikurim, there is no shir of how much you have to give. Afkan ein lo shir. What is lachmei toida more comparable to bikurim or trumas meiser? Done in truma she'ena charei truma. Trumas meiser is the last truma that's taken from produce. Mi truma she'ena charei truma. Val yuchiach bikurim she'esh charei truma. After you take bikurim is just the first fruits that blossom, but you still have to take off trumas and maishers from the whole crop once the whole crop is complete. Oy kalech l'derech done in truma nechelas b'makim kadosh. Bikurim has to be eaten in Yerushalayim, and the lachmei taida have to be eaten in Yerushalayim. B'truma nechelas b'makim kadosh. Val tekiach trumas meiser, which can be eaten by the kohen anywhere. Shenechelas b'chol makim talmud leimer gzeir shava mimenu truma l'Hashem. Uses the word mimenu, sai by the carbon taida, and sai by the trumas meiser. Trumas meiser mimenu truma l'gzeir shava. Gewaltig. So lamadnu l'truma shu'echad me'asar. Now we know that the amount of bread that's taken is 1/10. But 1/10 of what? Avolan yeda mikama hichala. How many Yisraelis you have to start off? Now we already learned in the Mishnah that the chametz is made out of 10 Yisraelis, and the matzah is made out of 10 Yisraelis. Now we're going to get to Makar for that. It's Gzeres HaKosov. Hareni don't. Nemer kan lechem. It says lechem in reference to the carbon taida. But nemer lalon b'shtei lechem by shvuas lechem. Ma lalon isarin lachala. Just like by the shtei lechem, it's isarin lachala because it's mufurish in the pasuk. It says in the pasuk, "Mi moishvasechem taviu lechem tnuva shtayim Shnei Esrainim. So the two lechems of Shavuos were made out of two Esrainim. So therefore, Afkan, so too by the Torah, it's Yisrael L'chala. Oy kalach l'derech zu. Or maybe look at it from a different perspective. Nemer kan lechem, but nemer belechem aponim lechem. Maybe compare the lachmei toida to the lechem aponim. Mal alon shnei yisroinos. By the lechem aponim, it's 2 yisroinos per bread. Afkan shnei yisroinos. Zok Gemara nearly midaima. What is the lachmei toida more comparable to? Is it lechem aponim or is it the shtei lechem? Don in mincha ba chometz imazevach mi mincha ba chometz imazevach. There are two similarities between the toida and the shtei lechem. A, there's some breads that are chometz, the shtei lechem is chometz, and B, is they're brought to accompany a carbon. Val yechiach lechem aponim. First of all, sheina ba chometz. It's not chometz to lechem aponim, and imazevach. It's not brought with a carbon. It's a standalone carbon. Or maybe it is more similar to lechem aponim. Done in mincha ba me'eretz v'chutz la'aretz minachalush u'minayashon, which is the carbon toida. You can take any type of a grain, any type of wheat to make your lachmei toida. So learn it from mincha, which is the lechem aponim haba me'eretz v'chutz la'aretz minachalush u'minayashon. But don't learn it from the shtei lechem. V'ayich shtei lechem shein bois element achadush and u'minaretz. Talmud Loimer mimoishvoisechem taviu, by the shtei lechem, it says mimoishvoisechem taviu lechem tenufa shtayim. The word taviu is not relevant because the pasuk is already talking about the shtei lechem. So now we're just giving the specs of the shtei lechem. It should have said mimoishvoisechem lechem tenufa. The word taviu is extra. Shein Talmud Loimer taviu umat Talmud Loimer taviu shekol ma sha'atam mevi mimakam acher. It's teaching us that anytime you're bringing breads that have chametz content similar to the shtei lechem, harehu kazeh, should have the same din as the shtei lechem, meaning a disarin. Mal ala disarin lachalo, just like by the shtei lechem, it's disarin for each chala. Afkan disarin lachalo for each chala of chametz. We're talking about chametz here. Afkan disarin lachalo. Because remember, from the taviu, we're only teaching about lechem that's chametz, right? The whole comparison is we're learning taviu means anytime you bring a similar carbon to the shtei lechem, meaning anytime you bring chametz, it has to be made out of a nisaron. So now we only know that the 1 min, the 10 breads that were chametz, they have to be brought from a nisaron each. Zok Gemara ima lahalon shnei asroinis afkan shnei asroinis. Who said that that's how you're supposed to learn it up? You're learning up that just like there was an isarin for each one of the shtei lechems, so to each bread of chametz is an isarin. Maybe look at it differently. Maybe by the shtei lechem, the full 2 lechems are made out of 2 esrainos. So maybe all 10 breads of chametz have to be 2 esrainos. You're learning out of shtei lechem, but who said you're learning it upright? Who said you learned that it's 1 isarin per bread? Maybe it's 2 esrainos for the total carbon. And the Gemara is going to talk about this on Amud Aleph. The extra yud teaches us lemadnu asara lechametz. That's how we know from Tiyena. Tiyena, I believe, is the pasuk by Shtei Alechem as well. It says taviu lechem tnufa shtayim Shtei Yisraelim turtles. Tiyena, the extra yud to tell you that by the other carbon of chametz, referring to the 10 breads of a carbon taida, they're each going to be a nisarin. Okay, so now I know those 10 breads. What about the other 30? Asar l'matzah minayin. How do we know what the Mishnah tells us that there's 2 esrainos for the 30 breads of matzah? Talmud Loimer al chalois lechem chametz. So the pasuk says, and we need to see the Ksav Yan and Rashi to clarify what this means. The pasuk says, Talmud Loimer al chalois matzah lechem chametz uleilmin eksiv. And earlier in the Parshas HaToida, the pasuk says, v'hikriv al zevach HaToida chalois matzos v'samach lo al chalois lechem chametz. So we're comparing the matzah to the chametz. Neged chametz have matzah, equal to what you're bringing for the chametz. Bring an equal share in matzah. Nimtzu esrim yisrainos. So you'll have a total of 20 yisrainos. Lachmei toida asar lechametz v'asar lematzah. Zokim yochel asar shebamatzah lo yu kulam elo mimin echad. You would have thought that the 10 Yisroinos of the breads that are matzah should all be the same type, not three types. Talmud Loimer, Maltadi Yakrivenu, Vikram Vachatoida, Chalois Matzos, Pelulus Bashemin, Urkike Matzos, Meshuchim Bashemin, and Soilus Meruvechas. The Torah says very clearly that there has to be three different types of breads that are matzah. I'm sorry. Nibzu Shloisha Esroinim, Ushlish, Lechol Minumin, as the Mishnah concluded, Vishalois Chalois Li Sarin. V'nimtzu lachmei toida are boim. So the sum total of lachmei toida are 40. Noitom and arba, you take 4 out of 40. V'noisen l'koyin, v'ashar necholom l'baylam, and the remainder is eaten by the baylam. Amar, v'hikr of mimenu mina mechuber. Right, we're going back to analyze and break down this price. V'hikr mimenu mina mechuber, meaning it's got to be connected. Frank the Gemara l'me'ata d'chsiv es cholchelbo yor mimenu. Hasamai mechuberika. When it's talking about the carbon, it says, take the chelboy from it. From it is mashma that the whole carbon is still intact with the meat. The Gemara is assuming that maybe the meat was already cut away by the time that they're taking the emurim and placing it on the mizbeach. So the Gemara, no, in fact, it's right. Take out the emurim when the whole animal is still intact. We even had that a Korban Pesach, if it was on Erev Shabbos, there's a machlokes if you only skin half of it and you leave the whole animal complete just to get the emurim out. So when you take the emurim, in fact, it isn't mimenu because the animal is supposed to be intact. Amar, nemerkan truma, but never b'trumas ma'aser truma. In fact, Gemara, why are you picking trumas ma'aser? There are other trumas that you can pick from. V'neilaf mi trumas midyon. By the trumas midyon, when the Yidden won the war of Midyon, Hashem was geyser that 1/500th of whatever you gathered had to be given as truma. So the Gemara, because done in truma the heges l'doirish, with truma the heges l'doirish, which would be trumas meiser. But the riach trumas midyon, which is a one-shot deal, changing the heges l'doirish, don't learn the trumas taida, which is l'doirish, from the one-shot deal that happened in midyon. Frank Gemara v'neil for trumas chala, which is how much you have to separate for chala. So the Gemara, Tanu the very Bishmael. Done in davar shenemar boy mimenu, it says mimenu. That was where we have our gzer shava. Lafukin trumas chala the loy nemer boy mimenu truma l'shem. So we're going back to our gzer shava. Now I don't understand. I was trying to figure this out yesterday. How come the Gemara doesn't ask compare it to regular truma, which is 1 out of 40 or 1 out of 50 or 1 out of 60? I'm not sure why the Gemara shops around. Why this truma? Why not trumas midyan? Why not trumas chala? I don't know why the Gemara didn't say why not regular truma. It must be a stupid question because nobody asks it, but I don't know the answer. Because the most obvious truma is regular truma. You jump straight to trumas meiser. But I'm not sure I understand why. What's the reason for it? Why the Gemara didn't even consider that? Now the maskana is not fair because you need the word mimenu l'gzer shava, which is by trumas meiser. But if the Gemara is clearing over here, before the Gemara knew it was working with the gzer shava, the Gemara says compare it to other trumas. So why didn't the Gemara compare it to truma gedolah, the most obvious one? And I don't know the answer. Boy Rava. Trumas lachmei toida chayavin alei misa v'chaymish or ein chayavin alei misa v'chaymish. We're comparing it to trumas meiser. Do you know trumas meiser is a din of truma? If a zar eats truma, he's chayav misa v'dei shemayim, and if he in a b'shay, he's got to give it back and add 20%. So do we treat the chalas toida mamish like truma that it would have those halachas as well? Even the ishkas the trumas meiser, maybe it's exactly trumas meiser dami. Adelma boy v'chamishisai. The Torah, when it talks about adding a fifth to a zor u'itz truma, it says boy v'chamishisai davke by trumas meiser mid rachmana. So maybe not. Now the question midamas or ain't midamas. Why they're not telling you the I don't know. We know that there's halacha that if truma mixes into chulin, you need 200 times to be mevatlet. How about this? So tomorrow take you. Now the Rishonim ask an obvious question. Midaraisa. Even truma is batal and roif. It's only a derabbanan to kachuma that it's 1 in 200. So they ask the kasha, what type of shayla is this? I mean, it's a derabbanan. But this is the vos. Amar Talmud learn tihiyana. Tihiyana tells you that don't just say that all 10 breads of chametz by the taida have to be 2 isroinis, like the total amount used for the shtei lechem. Rather, 1 yisarim per bread. How do you see that in the word tihiyana? My Talmudah. How do you see that in the word tiyana? But Gemara, Amar B'Yitzchak Bar Avdima tiyana ksiv with the extra yud. So we're focusing on the extra yud. For Gemara, Amar Asara Kapizi. How do you know it has to be 10 Yisroinais maybe it's a different shear that we're talking about. Maybe it's a Sar Kapizi. Amarava, it's Kizbi Yisroinos Diber Hakosu. The Torah, if you look at the context of Tiena, it's speaking about Yisroinos. Lamadnu Asar Lachametz, Asar Lamatzibinain. Right, so we're back to analyzing the brisa. How do you know by the matzah you also have a total of 10 Yisroinos? Tabelim al Chalois Lechem Chametz Kedeket Chametz Havi Matzah. Freit Gemara, V'chidavar Alamed Behekish Chayzum Alamed Behekish. How do we know that the lechem chametz is 10? It's from a hekish from shtei lechem. So how could you now use that to export it to the matzos? So Gemara, this is not mamish hekish. It's a menu v'davar acharu, because we do know part of the halacha that it's 1/10. We know that it's 1/10. We know from the Gzer Shava of Mimenu. So therefore, menu v'davar acharu, it's not pure hekish. It's also as a mixture of Gzer Shava involved. That's not a problem. How could you learn off to matzah? You have the extra taviyu to tell you that it's not a hekish, and therefore you could pass on the information through a hekish from the lechmi chometz to the lechmi matzah. Okay, Baruch Hashem. Even though I came late, we finished. I was under a little pressure there, but well, I get to.